Welcome to P Passionate W World, R Radio N Network, LLC, a multimedia company. Ann Arbor, Michigan, Boston, Massachusetts, Liverpool, England, Melrose, Florida, Los Angeles, California, Fullerton, California, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois are one of the many broadcast homes of PWRN, a multimedia company. The world in your hands. And now, without further ado, let me present to you one of our many hosts and their programs.
Hello there. This is Gina Gardiner and I'm your host on Passionate World Radio. Very pleased to be with you today. I'm the author of Thriving Not Surviving, the 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness and Success and Fulfillment. And I'm very pleased to say that that's become an international #1 bestseller. I'm joined today by Rachel Davidson, who is the author of The Point of Me, another international bestseller. And today we're going to be exploring with you the whole issue of self-sabotage. Just think back through your life and think how many times you've started something that you thought you really wanted to do. Perhaps a diet, giving up smoking, getting fit, or doing a project that's really going to move you on in your professional life. And something has scuppered it.
Yes.
And if you're really honest, the thing that has scuppered it has been you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think, when I work with clients, so often the problem has not been the external situation, so much as people have allowed things to get in the way of their success.
Yes.
And I think it's really worth exploring today the range of things that can get in your way and why, and then some potential strategies.
Yeah.
Before we go on, one of the things that I think you might find useful, listeners, is to think about your life and to think about those times when you've felt stuck or something has been going well and then suddenly it hasn't, or it's never quite got off the ground.
Yeah.
And as we go through all of the reasons behind self-sabotage, one of the things that I think is really important is that you're honest. Because if you're not honest with yourself, that's a form of self-sabotage.
It's quite tricky, isn't it, actually, as I'm sat here thinking also of the instances in my life where I may have self-sabotaged. And it's a sort of insipid trickster of an emotion, isn't it? Because by its very nature, it doesn't necessarily come announcing itself as, "Hi, I'm self-sabotage here."
No.
You self-sabotage in many regards by justifying what you're doing to yourself with other words and other explanations, and they're all constructs to basically avoid what's really at the core of it. So I'm pretty certain that I have self-sabotaged in my life, and I remain unaware of it.
I think there are a number of levels to this, and I think that's part of the challenge, really. There are some when it's very obvious.
Yeah.
I've decided I wanted to lose a bit of weight. Had been the same weight for many, many years and suddenly started to put weight on, and so made the decision that I was going to really cut down.
Yeah.
And then I went to a friend who had a wonderful looking cake.
Yeah.
And so thought, just a slice.
Yeah.
Now, just the slice wouldn't have made any difference.
Yeah.
But because I'd eaten the slice, when I came home, I thought, I've been naughty today.
Yeah.
I'll just have some more.
A bar of chocolate won't hurt that much.
And so before you know where you are, that just a slice has turned into something very, very different.
Okay, so there'll be lots of people listening to this that say, "Oh my God, I do that all the time." Is that self-sabotage, or is that just being weak in the moment?
Well, you tell me the difference. Because it depends really upon what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
If what you want to achieve is being more healthy and weighing less, then it's not the eating of the slice of cake, the one thing. It's the fact that then that says, well, I've broken it once, so there's no point in carrying on. And it's the no point in carrying on today, or no point in carrying on this week. I'll start again on Monday, which many of us do. That's the self-sabotage bit.
Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? That's when it tips into self-sabotage. That's because we are all human, we all err, and that's totally natural and totally normal, isn't it? To fall off the cake wagon happens.
And use cake as a metaphor for pretty well anything, really. It's not the one-offs, it's the pattern. And for me, self-sabotage is when you allow the one-off to become a pattern which stops you getting where you want to go. Now, I think there are lots of forms of self-sabotage. We've talked today about the diet, giving up smoking, wanting to get fit and exercise, allowing other people to put us off. You know, other people say, what do you want to do that for? You're fine as you are. Or you're never going to do that. And allowing...
How are you ever going to earn the money to do that? All these sorts of comments that come at you in life.
And I think the listening to negative voices, it's easy to blame the negative voices that we hear that are external to us, our parents, our friends, our boss, our colleagues. But it's the internal voice. It's our internal voice which says, you're never going to do that, so why bother?
Yeah, it's the internal voice that says, they're right, you know, they're right. And that's the voice that we're all listening to, really, even when we say, oh, you know, my boss put me off. Actually, the real story is, I heard my boss say something negative and I chose to believe it.
Well, I think there's two parts to this. There is definitely the believing what other people say. But there's also that voice which doesn't require an external person to say, no, you're not good enough, or you're never going to do this, or do you want to be seen to fail? So for me, at the heart of any self-sabotage is fear. Fear of failure. Fear of success. Fear, if I do this, will I be different to other people? Will I no longer belong? Will I be rejected?
Rejection,
The sense of our need to be part of is so hot wired into us that very often the self-sabotage is, I need to stay where I am. I need to stay safe in my comfort zone. If I don't do anything different, then I will be okay.
And it's interesting because it brings to mind a friend, which I've spoken about before, actually, in one of our much earlier radio shows, of how she self-sabotaged herself with regard to her diet and was extremely successful in dieting, lost literally half of herself, and also disappeared.
What, personality-wise?
Yes, she barely spoke. She was literally half of herself, and that's a form of self-sabotage. Somehow, I don't understand, and I've not had deep enough conversations with her to really sort of get to the nub of it. But it really struck me that she's put all the weight back on again, and is notably back to her normal self, personality-wise. But that whole process was some act of self-sabotage against herself, and at the core of it, I'm pretty certain, it is fear of how she's seen, of how she doesn't want to interact in certain ways, but society just demands it of her, and all of these sort of fears around relationships and intimacy and so on and so forth. And she self-sabotages by making herself fat and therefore unattractive, so that she doesn't have to deal with some of these other issues. That's definitely a form of self-sabotage.
I think that's very true. And not suggesting this of your friend, but it's very common for people who have experienced abuse as a child, whether that's physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, to be very use their weight as a protection. But you know, and that's, one could argue, is extreme. But actually, you know, if you're unhappy about yourself, the self-fulfilling prophecy feels safe. So, you know, whatever's going on, if you find the pattern, it's recognising what's at the very core of that pattern. You know, if it's work related, for example, you know, if I shine, I'm going to lose my mates. If I shine, will I be seen as boastful and somebody who is ego-driven?
Yes.
If I shine, things are going to be different, and I'm fearful of the unknown.
Yes.
In the same way that people who are very fearful of failure, if I don't try, I haven't failed.
Yeah.
And so we make these connections in our heads, and then having got that connection, these voices will start, and they can be, for some people, they can be the little whisper, and other people a very insistent voice that goes round and round in their head.
Yes.
Whatever your form of self-sabotage, and we all have them, I've yet to meet anybody who has no form of self-sabotage. Awareness is the first thing to do.
I would think that my most frequent form of self-sabotage at the moment is regarding getting down and doing my writing. And my self-sabotage comes in the form of having strict sort of, I can only write if scenarios going on in my head. And it is a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Because it means that on some days I can justify not starting.
And there will be days when your justification is absolutely the truth, everybody's truth.
Yes.
And other days when they're not.
Yeah.
And I think overwhelm is one of those things that becomes a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
That we always underestimate what we can do in a long period, but we overestimate what we can do in a day.
Right, yes.
Or an hour.
Yeah.
Then we become overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I think, again, it's look for the pattern.
Yeah.
If you're consistently overwhelmed by what you're doing, then you have to question, what are you doing? And is there a better way of doing it? Can you plan more strategically? Can you delegate more effectively?
Yes.
Are there things that you're doing that actually you shouldn't be doing at all in order to achieve your goal?
Yeah. I know on Friday when I sat down and I'd had it in my head, I would sit and write 2,000 words, that my self-sabotage went something along the lines of, my job, there was an issue around my job, and I could have chosen to ignore it. It wouldn't have hurt to leave it 3-4 hours, but somehow it felt easier to deal with the problem that was just over there than it was to sit down and do, because writing obviously is a very personal, it's hard work. But actually hard work in this sort of more normal sense of it, sitting and answering customer inquiries, didn't feel as much hard work, and I was annoyed with myself about it because I knew I'd taken that choice and that it was an easier choice than the harder one of, no, I'm going to push that sort of, I know it's a little bit of a fire, but I can just let it burn a little bit, and I'm going to go do this personal hard work over here, write 2,000 words, and so I did self-sabotage, and it's very, very sneaky.
Yes, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many people find that self-sabotage actually is effectively stopping them from living their dream.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot on this show about the choice of being a victim or not.
Yes.
A victim to circumstances, a victim to our emotions. Yeah. And I think self-sabotage is one of those things that keeps us very stuck in that myth that we are a victim and that we have no choice.
And just building on that, what do you think about self-sabotage as an act to gain pity or attention?
Certainly, I think there are lots of situations where being the victim feels good. Many children are taught by circumstances that you get attention when you're poorly. You get attention when you're really ill.
Yes.
You get attention when you're very unhappy.
Yes.
You get attention when you're a victim.
Yeah.
And so what they do is they start a pattern of behaviour, which is if I stay in victim rather than stepping into my power, then other people will notice and I'll get time and attention. Now, it's not a conscious decision most of the time, but it's very powerful. And so you'll find, many, I'm not saying all people who are ill are in this way, please don't think that, but there are a number of people who will consistently have something wrong with them.
Yes.
And it's their truth, and they are feeling the pain and the discomfort. I'm not suggesting they aren't.
Yeah.
But actually, they're things that they need other people to notice them.
Yes.
And I would suggest to you that it's around their sense of self-worth.
Yes.
That their sense of self-worth is entirely tied to other people noticing them, rather than feeling confident in themselves.
Yes, and it's a very, very extreme example, but the act of suicide, or at least the act of attempting suicide, is the ultimate form of self-sabotage.
Attempting suicide,
Yes.
multiple attempts at suicide.
Yes.
I can remember being on a course with Anthony Robbins once, and he does a lot of stage work, and there was a young lady on the stage who had tried to commit suicide 7 times. And we were all a bit shocked when Tony Robbins' retort to her initially was, "You're not very good at it, are you?"
After 7 times, it's a
What
truth.
turned out was that the only time her parents worked together, they were divorced, very acrimonious divorce. The only time they were at one was when she had attempted suicide.
Right.
So he stopped working with her. He went back to work with her and did a very fine job, I have to say.
Yeah.
But he started to work with parents to recognise that your pattern of behaviour is triggering a pattern of behaviour in your daughter.
Yeah.
If you love her and you want something different, then you've got to learn to work together.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to like each other, but you have to work together consistently as her parents.
Yes.
Now, that's an extreme example of
it is.
both parties, in a sense, self-sabotaging.
Yes.
And the parents sabotaging the daughter, or the daughter allowing them to sabotage her. She was at early teens, so perhaps didn't have the maturity to recognise what was going on.
Sure.
But many people go through their lives without recognise what's going on.
Yes.
So the first thing has to be awareness.
Yes.
So what I would say is, look at your track record.
Yeah.
Look at what's gone on over your life and look for the patterns. And then think about what's going on.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier before the programme about the universal laws, and I think self-sabotage includes an avoidance of those.
Yes.
And the 4 that strike me are, if you truly take responsibility for yourself, and you're the only person that you are responsible for, it's a universal law, you can't be responsible, unless we're talking about tiny children.
Tiny children's fine.
Yeah, but apart from that, the only person you are totally responsible for is you.
Yes.
That's your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being.
Yes.
And so if you take on board responsibility for you, and your actions or lack of them, when you do it, how you do it, if you do it at all, then by stepping into that responsibility for you, you are less likely to self-sabotage.
Yes.
There are other sneaky ways it gets in, but you're less likely to.
But ultimately, if you're living that universal truth of knowing that you are the only one responsible for you, when you start to self-sabotage, it won't go deep, will it? Because it'll bounce off that resilient, I know I'm responsible for me.
Yeah.
So it'll happen, but it just won't go deep enough to become a self-fulfilling prophecy or a destructive habit or whatever.
And my experience of people who truly take responsibility for their well-being in the round is that they're generally very aware. And so they tend to be aware of these patterns quickly.
Yes.
Not always, but generally speaking.
Yeah.
So the second universal law is that everything we do is a choice. It's our choice, whether we do something or not, how we do it, when we do it, whether, how we say things, whether we say things. And I think taking the responsibility and recognising it is actually our choice, those 2 things become very, very powerful.
Yes.
Bearing in mind that self-sabotage is based on fear.
Yes.
Fear of being alone, fear of failing, fear of success, fear of being rejected.
Yes.
Ultimately, once you take responsibility and you choose to do so, then those things have far less power, don't they?
Yes, because the the opposite of living in fear is to live in love,
Yeah.
and to accept responsibility for oneself, and to face up to the fact that your life is full of choices.
Yeah.
And that and the free will as well. That is an act of love to yourself.
But isn't choice and free will, they are synonymous, aren't they?
Yes.
I think the other universal law is if you do nothing different, nothing will change.
Yeah.
So it's part of recognising that, anything that you want to be different in your life is going to take action.
Yes.
And that action needs to be consistent. One of the prime examples of self-sabotage is you start something, but you give it up.
Yeah.
And you give it up when things get a bit tough.
Yes.
And inevitably, things do get a bit tough.
Yes.
So I think, what would be helpful to listeners is to go into what are the solutions.
Yes.
Because recognising things, awareness is great, but if you haven't got any solutions, then you get stuck in this, I know I'm not doing it right and I'm self-sabotaging. But hey...
What the hell do you do? Yeah.
So awareness is first step, okay? And I think examining it, but without blame, without judgment, without aren't I a terrible person because I do this. It just is.
Yes.
But because it is now does not mean it has to be moving forward.
Yes, that's a good point actually, is taking that negative blame of, making yourself feel worse about it. That's not helpful. That's
another form of sabotage, isn't it?
Yeah.
So recognising the pattern and making the choice, the decision, actually no more. And recognising how sneaky self-sabotage has been in the past, and listen to the language. Put the language that it's been going on in the past and that you're now working on it in the present in order to achieve whatever in the future.
Yes.
Because our language is so important. If we language it and we keep our language, I'm constantly being self-sabotaged, I sabotage myself all the time, the brain thinks, well, that's what you want. And so it keeps doing it.
Yes.
So language it in the past, and then be clear about what it is you want, and most importantly, what's your why for that?
Okay.
Why is it important? Because if it's truly important, then you're much less likely to self-sabotage. And when you do, it'll be easier to get back on track.
Yeah, getting clear on your why you want to do anything or
stop doing something.
Stop doing something, exactly, is like putting an anchor down, isn't it?
Yes.
It really does, ground you, and it's a point that you can always come back to and feel solid about.
And I think that, let's use weight as an example. And many people struggle with their weight, don't they? And if you look at the number of people who diet and lose weight, get to the weight they want, and then put weight back on again, you have to think, well, they're losing weight's obviously been important to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone to all that effort.
That's right.
So why is it that as soon as the diet's finished, they go back to old habits?
Yes.
And I think so much of this comes back to our sense of self-worth.
Yes.
Am I worth this?
Yes.
Do I deserve this?
Yes.
Do I love who I am?
Yes.
Wobbly bits and all. And, as you get older, gravity starts to have its wicked way. Loving who you are, whether you've got wrinkles. I mean, you've earned those wrinkles, haven't you? They are life's experiences. And recognising that, you are more than your outward appearance. But if you want to lose weight, do it because you want to be healthy, because you want to live a long and healthy life, rather than because you want to please somebody else's view of how you look.
Yes, yes.
So your intrinsic sense of self-worth.
Yes.
This is true of, you want a promotion or you want to do well on a project at work.
Yeah.
The actual activity is almost of no account. It's what's the underpinning why
Yes.
Why is it that it's important to you?
Yes.
And recognising that if it's only important to other people and not for you, then self-sabotage will be round the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
it
doing
has to be
something
important
for your
you.
true self
Yeah.
is going to take effort, but actually it's easy in the sense that once you've identified it and you're clear on it, it comes from inside. Doing something for other people will only ever lead you towards resenting them for the effort that you're putting in, because they won't appreciate it the way your true self
That's
will
a belief,
it.
I have to say.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that there are many people who do things for other people because that makes them feel good about them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And so whilst I accept that there are lots of people who will do things for other people and the hope that that will get them the appreciation and recognition which doesn't come, there are equally as many people who do it simply because that makes them feel good about them.
Okay.
Either way, you need to be doing it because it's what is right for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't do things for other people, not for a moment, but be aware that if the only way you feel good is doing things for other people, that's a route that does not in any way create a great relationship with you.
Yeah.
And I think at the heart of all of this, if you've got a great relationship with yourself, then you are less likely to self-sabotage. Or if you do, it'll be very, very short-lived rather than become this entrenched pattern that actually scuppers any chance of long-term success.
Yes.
And remember, I'd like to remind people, we started off by saying fear of success, fear of failure are at the heart of any self-sabotage.
Yes.
Fear that I won't be enough, fear that I won't be part of, I'll be rejected.
Yeah.
So living from a place of love, loving yourself has to be the first thing.
Yes,
creating that positive relationship with yourself is at the heart of so much of what we talk about, isn't it? And your spiritual development.
Yeah.
If you fall off the wagon, and inevitably we all do at some point, just see that as a blip. But what lots of people do is, I've eaten that piece of cake, it's a Tuesday. I'll start my diet again on Monday.
Or I've ruined it now, there's no point
I might as well
now.
have a bag of chips. And so recognising that, okay, you made a choice to have that piece of cake. Now accommodate that in the rest of your day or have a really sensible day the following day. If you promise to do something for work and you're overwhelmed, and overwhelm is another great self-sabotage, have you planned it? And I think that strategically planning your way forward, being realistic, having a level of challenge, but being realistic about what you can achieve. And remember, most great development, most progress is done, small actions consistently done, rather than the grand gesture. And we've talked about that a lot, haven't we?
Yeah. Definitely, and there is a truism to the phrase of, if you fall off a horse, get back on it again. Because people fall off horses, and it's hard and it hurts. But the best thing to do, excuse me, is to get over the fear and just get back on with the job again, and don't give yourself a hard time for the fall. It happens.
I think the next thing is surround yourself with the sort of people who are going to support you, and support you in doing the best thing, not support you in your sabotage. Because there are lots of people who like to sabotage others because it makes them feel good about themselves. So have another piece of cake means that it's all right for me to have a piece of cake. And finding the right sort of people who will challenge you but do it constructively and who expect the best of you, I think is really important. We've talked a bit about the language that you use. Language yourself into success. I used to be doing this, but I don't do that anymore. I'm working towards, and my goal is. And I think all of those things are really, really important. People who are not familiar with visualising, visualise yourself where you have succeeded and maintain that success. So, if you've got a big project on and you've been perhaps sabotaging that by not getting on with it, by faffing about and not grasping the nettle, by being stuck in overwhelm. Visualize that project done.
That's an interesting point, actually, because visualizing your self-sabotage as a character, as a person who comes and tries to get inside your head. Liz Gilbert, in her book Big Magic, talks about fear as a character, and she talks to her fear, and she invites them to come and sit on a chair, but she makes it very clear to them that they're not in the driving seat. But
really sound advice.
They have to be at the party. She acknowledges that she can't keep them away from the party, like Maleficent is kept away from the party, and it makes it a whole lot worse.
Yes.
So she invites her character of fear in, and I think actually if you visualise whatever your mode of self-sabotage as a person, it can often help to be more aware of it and also control it.
Awareness, as we said, is the first stage. Just trying to bury all of this stuff doesn't work. It has a habit of coming back to bite you at the very inopportune, most difficult moment. Yes. And I think what I'd like to leave people with is when things go well, even the small steps, celebrate that success, but not in a way that's going to sabotage you. So if you're trying to give up the drink, don't celebrate with a glass of champagne, or if you're trying to lose weight, you don't celebrate with a piece of cake, but actually something that gives you an opportunity to say, yeah, I've done that. Yes. I celebrate that.
Yes, yes.
So our time has gone very quickly today. Thank you very, very much for joining us. If you'd like a copy of my latest #1 bestseller, you can find that on genuinely-you.com. That's Thriving Not Surviving, the 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success and Fulfillment. There's a free digital download there. We'd love to know whether you enjoy the show and what you'd like us to cover in future shows. So please do contact us through the website or through the radio show. I'm your host, Gina Gardiner. I'm very pleased to be part of Passionate World Radio and look forward to seeing you on our next show. Take care. Bye now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Robertson, host of TV Confidential. Thank you so much for listening to our program on PWRN, Passionate World Radio Network. If you like TV Confidential or any of the other programs you hear every week on PWRN, please consider supporting this station by becoming a patron of Passionate World Radio Network through Patreon. It is easy to do. It won't cost you more than a few dollars per month. And best of all, you will help PWRN continue to educate, enlighten, and entertain our global audience of 10 million strong and growing. For more information, go to patreon.com/PWRN. That's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/PWRN. And thank you again for listening.
Thank you for listening to Passionate World Radio Network, a multimedia company. You can listen to this program all over again at PassionateWorldRadioNetwork.com, Facebook.com/PWRN, Twitter.com/PWRN, GooglePlus.com/PWRN. Distinguish yourself from the ordinary. And remember, please keep listening.